Elena Harper's knees hit the dirt for the seventh time. Her cracked lips moved in silence. No water left, no prayers left, nothing but the stubborn rhythm of one hand clawing forward, then the other. The summer sun had taken everything from her except her refusal to die. Somewhere ahead, a man was waiting. A stranger who'd paid for a bride he'd never met. She would reach him, or she would leave her bones on this road. If you want to see whether she survives, and whether survival is even the beginning of her story, subscribe now, and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels together. Her hand found the fence post before her eyes could focus. Elena Harper wrapped her fingers around the splintered wood and held on like it was the last solid thing in the world. Her body wanted to fall. Every muscle screamed surrender. But she locked her grip tighter and forced her chin up. "Not yet," she whispered through lips so cracked they bled when she spoke. "Not yet." The sun pressed down on her shoulders like a punishment. 3 days without proper water. 2 days since the wagon driver had dumped her belongings in the dust and told her he wasn't going another mile for some desperate Eastern woman chasing a marriage arrangement that would probably fall apart anyway. She'd watched him turn his horses around. She'd watched the dust settle behind his wheels, and then she'd started walking. Now the fence line stretched ahead of her, broken in places, weathered and worn. But it meant something. Fences meant property. Property meant people. People meant water. Elena pushed herself upright and took another step. Her boots, once fine leather now cracked and filthy, dragged against the hard ground. The hem of her gray dress had torn somewhere around mile 15. She'd stopped counting after that. "Elena Harper," she said aloud, testing whether her voice still worked. 26 years old, formerly of Philadelphia. Currently, she looked around at the endless stretch of dry grass and distant hills. Currently walking. She almost laughed. Almost. But laughing required moisture she didn't have. The fence line curved ahead, and she followed it with her eyes until she spotted something that made her heart stutter. A roof, low and dark against the horizon. "Oh, God." The words came out as barely a rasp. "Oh, thank God." She started walking faster. Her legs protested. Her vision swam. But that roof stayed fixed in place, getting slowly impossibly closer with every agonizing step. Caleb Ryder stood at his kitchen window, rolling a cigarette he didn't intend to smoke. 3 months. He'd written that advertisement 3 months ago, sitting at this same table with a bottle of whiskey and a pen that kept running dry. The words had felt like pulling teeth. Widower seeks practical wife. No romance expected. Hard work required. Must be willing to live simply. He'd sent it to an agency back east, paid the fee, and tried to forget about it. But the letters had started coming. Dozens of them. Women looking for escape, for opportunity, for something they couldn't find where they were. He'd read through them all, searching for what? He didn't even know anymore. Then, Elena Harper's letter had arrived. "I am not looking for love," she'd written. "I am looking for survival. I can work. I can learn. I can be useful. If that is enough, then perhaps we can help each other. No flowery promises. No romantic delusions. Just honesty, plain and sharp as a blade." He'd written back the same day. Now he was supposed to meet her at the depot in Thornwood, 18 miles east. The stage was due tomorrow morning. He'd already arranged to borrow a wagon, already set out clean sheets in the spare room, already practiced what he was going to say when he saw her for the first time. "Ma'am, I'm Caleb Ryder. I reckon you're Miss Harper." Simple. Direct. No room for awkwardness. He set down the unlit cigarette and turned away from the window. That's when he saw the figure stumbling along his fence line. Elena's knees buckled 50 yards from the house. She went down hard palms, scraping against rocks and dead grass. For a moment, she just stayed there, head hanging, watching drops of sweat, or maybe tears, she couldn't tell anymore, fall into the dust beneath her. "Get up!" Her voice came out thin and broken. "Elena Margaret Harper, you get up right now." She pushed herself to her knees, then to her feet. The world tilted sideways and she grabbed at air until it steadied. The house was so close now. She could see the weathered boards, the small porch, the single window catching the afternoon light. She could see a man standing on that porch watching her. Help! The word came out as nothing more than a breath. She tried again louder. Please help! Her legs gave out completely. The last thing she felt before darkness took her was the ground rushing up to meet her face. Caleb was already running before she hit the dirt. He'd seen plenty of hard things in his 41 years drought disease death in a dozen different forms. But something about watching this woman collapse 20 feet from his front door sent a shock through his chest that he hadn't felt in years. He reached her in seconds, dropping to his knees beside her crumpled form. She lay face down in the dust, her gray dress torn and filthy. Her hair dark brown, he noticed half fallen from whatever pins had been holding it. Ma'am? He touched her shoulder carefully. Ma'am, can you hear me? No response. He turned her over as gently as he could manage, and his breath caught when he saw her face. Younger than he'd expected. Lips cracked and bleeding. Skin burned red from the sun. But beneath the damaged features that spoke of strength rather than fragility. Ma'am. He tapped her cheek lightly. Come on now. Open your eyes. Her eyelids fluttered. A small sound escaped her throat, half groan, half sob. There you go, Caleb said, keeping his voice steady. You're all right. You're safe now. Her eyes opened. Gray-green, he registered. The color of sage after rain. Water, she whispered. I'll get you water. But first, I need to get you inside. Can you stand if I help you? She tried to nod, but even that small movement seemed to cost her. Caleb didn't wait for more permission. He slid one arm under her shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted her off the ground. She weighed almost nothing. That fact bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Elena came back to consciousness in pieces. First, the sensation of something soft beneath her. A mattress. She was lying on a mattress. Second, the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving somewhere nearby. Third, the blessed, impossible feeling of water touching her lips. She drank without thinking, without caution. Just opened her mouth and let the cool liquid pour down her throat until she choked on it. Easy. A man's voice, low and rough. Easy now. Small sips. You'll make yourself sick. She forced herself to slow down, to breathe, to take small, careful swallows that her body could actually handle. When the cup finally pulled away, she opened her eyes. A man sat in a wooden chair beside the bed, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He was older than her, maybe 15 years, maybe more. Dark hair shot through with gray at the temples. A face that looked like it had been carved out of hard living and harder choices. And eyes blue, she thought, though the light made it difficult to tell that held more wariness than warmth. You're Caleb Ryder, she said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, cracked and hollow. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. How'd you know that? Because I've been walking toward your ranch for 3 days. She tried to push herself upright, but her arms trembled so badly she couldn't manage it. I'm Elena Harper, your mail-order bride. The silence that followed her words stretched long enough to make her uncomfortable. Then Caleb Ryder said very quietly, You were supposed to arrive tomorrow. On the stage. I was. Elena closed her eyes. The effort of speaking was almost too much. The driver. He changed his mind about the route, said he wasn't going that far for one passenger. Left me at a crossroads 2 days back. Left you. Caleb's voice had gone flat. Just left you there. Told me the ranch was only 15 miles, that I could walk it easy. A bitter laugh scraped out of her throat. I think he lied about the distance. She heard Caleb's chair creak as he stood up, heard his boots move across the floor. When she opened her eyes again, he was standing at the window with his back to her, his shoulders rigid. What was his name? He asked. I don't know. I didn't think to ask. She paused. Why? Because when I find out, I'm going to break his jaw." The words were spoken without heat, without drama. Just a simple statement of intent, like he was talking about fixing a broken fence. Elena stared at his back, trying to reconcile this man with the brief, business-like letters she'd received. The letters hadn't prepared her for someone who would threaten violence on her behalf within 10 minutes of meeting her. "You don't have to do that," she said finally. Caleb turned around. His expression hadn't softened, but something in his eyes had shifted. "You walked 30 miles through open country in the middle of summer. No water, no supplies, no horse." He shook his head slowly. "Most people would have died. I almost did. But you didn't." He walked back to the chair and sat down again, studying her face. "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean, why? I mean, why didn't you give up? Sit down under a tree somewhere and wait for the end. Why keep walking?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering the question, considering the man who'd asked it. "Because I didn't come this far to die in the dirt," she said at last. "I came to survive. And survival means getting back up every time you fall." Caleb held her gaze. Neither of them blinked. "All right," he said finally. "Then let's talk about what happens next." 3 hours later, Elena had managed to keep down some broth, wash the worst of the dust from her face and hands, and change into a clean shirt that Caleb had offered her. It hung past her knees and smelled faintly of cedar, but it was soft and whole and not covered in 3 days' worth of trail dirt. She sat at his kitchen table now, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, watching him move around the small room with an economy of motion that spoke of long practice. "The arrangement," Caleb said without turning around, "was supposed to be straightforward. I remember the terms." Elena took a small sip of tea. "Partnership, not romance. Shared work, shared meals, separate rooms. Either party can end the agreement with 30 days' notice. You memorized it. I read your letter 47 times on the train." She set down her cup. "I wanted to make sure I understood what I was agreeing to." Caleb finally turned to face her. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his chest. "And you're still willing, after everything that happened, getting here. Are you asking if I've changed my mind? I'm asking if you know what you're getting into." His voice was blunt. "This isn't Philadelphia. This isn't a comfortable life with servants and society parties. This is hard work every day from sunup to sundown. This is droughts and diseases and neighbors who might not accept you. This is a chance," Elena interrupted. "That's what this is. A chance I didn't have back east." She met his eyes steadily. "I'm not looking for comfort, Mr. Ryder. I'm looking for a life I can build with my own 2 hands. If you're willing to let me try, then I'm willing to do the work." Caleb studied her for a long moment. His expression gave nothing away. "You've got grit," he said finally. "I'll give you that. I've got more than grit. I've got skills. I can keep books, manage accounts, organize supplies. I know basic medicine enough to treat common injuries and illnesses. I can sew, cook, preserve food for winter." She lifted her chin slightly. "I may not know ranching yet, but I learn fast." "Why?" The question came out sharp. Why would a woman with all those skills answer an advertisement like mine? Elena's hands tightened around her cup. She'd known this question would come. She'd practiced her answer 100 times. But sitting here looking at this hard-faced stranger who had carried her into his home and threatened to break someone's jaw on her behalf, she found herself wanting to tell the truth. "Because I ran out of other options." She forced the words out past the tightness in her throat. "My father died 6 months ago. He left nothing but debts. The creditors took everything: the house, the furniture, my mother's jewelry. I worked as a governess for a wealthy family, but when they found out about my circumstances..." She shrugged. "They decided I wasn't suitable anymore." Suitable? Their daughter was 18, about to enter society. They didn't want her associated with a woman from a ruined family. Elena heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "I don't blame them entirely. Reputation matters in those circles, but it left me with nothing. No job, no references, no way to support myself. I had just enough money to answer your advertisement and buy a train ticket west. Caleb was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. My wife died 4 years ago. Fever took her in less than a week. He uncrossed his arms, let them fall to his sides. I've been running this ranch alone since then, doing the work of 3 men with only my own 2 hands. I'm not interested in replacing her, no one could do that. But I need help, plain and simple, and I need somewhere to belong. Elena lifted her chin. So it seems we both have something to offer each other. Another long pause. Then Caleb pushed himself off the counter and extended his hand. Welcome to the Ryder Ranch, Miss Harper. Elena reached out and shook it. His grip was firm but careful, like he was conscious of his own strength. Call me Elena, she said. Caleb? He released her hand. Now get some rest. Tomorrow we start working. Elena lay awake long after Caleb's footsteps had faded into another part of the house. The spare room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the dark expanse of land. She could see stars through the glass, more stars than she'd ever seen in Philadelphia spread across the sky like scattered diamonds. She thought about the road she'd walked to get here, the blisters on her feet still raw and throbbing. The moment she'd collapsed in the dust, certain she was going to die. The strange, unexpected mercy of a man who asked her why she'd kept going instead of how. She thought about the letters in her pocket, letters she'd hidden from everyone, letters that proved just how little her past life had valued her. And she thought about Caleb Ryder's words. Most people would have died, but I didn't. She whispered to the darkness. I didn't. Sleep, when it finally came, was dreamless and deep. She woke to the sound of someone moving in the kitchen. Gray light filtered through the window early morning before full sunrise. Elena pushed herself upright, wincing at the stiffness in every muscle, and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her body wanted to lie back down. Her body wanted another 12 hours of sleep. But Elena Harper had never gotten anywhere by listening to what her body wanted. She found Caleb at the stove, frying eggs in a cast-iron pan. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. You should be resting. I've rested enough. She moved carefully to the table and lowered herself into a chair. What can I do? Caleb stared at her like she'd said something ridiculous. You almost died yesterday. I didn't, though. She folded her hands on the table. And I meant what I said last night. I'm here to work. For a moment she thought he was going to argue. His jaw tightened and something flickered in his eyes. Frustration maybe, or something closer to concern. Then he shook his head and turned back to the stove. Eat first. We'll talk about work after you've got something in your stomach. Elena almost smiled. Almost. Fair enough, she said. And that was how her new life began. Not with ceremony or celebration, but with eggs and silence, and the first pale light of a summer morning creeping across a stranger's kitchen floor. She didn't know yet that danger was already gathering on the horizon. She didn't know about the man named Victor Hale, or the fire that would test everything she'd built. She didn't know that surviving the desert had only been the beginning. All she knew in that quiet moment was that she had made it, and she wasn't going anywhere. The eggs sat heavy in Elena's stomach as she followed Caleb out to the barn that first morning. Her legs still trembled with every step, and more than once she had to grab the fence rail to steady herself. But she kept moving. She'd crawled 30 miles through hell to get here. She wasn't about to fall apart now, Caleb noticed. She could tell by the way his jaw tightened each time she stumbled. But he didn't say anything, didn't offer to let her rest, and for that she was grateful. He was treating her like someone capable of deciding her own limits. How many head of cattle? She asked as they approached the barn. 63, down from 90 last year. He pulled open the barn door. Lost some to the winter. Lost more to bad luck. What kind of bad luck? Caleb's hand paused on the door frame. The kind that wears a suit and calls itself progress. Before Elena could ask what that meant, a voice rang out from somewhere behind them. "Caleb Ryder, you stubborn fool!" They both turned. A woman was marching toward them across the dirt yard, her silver hair pinned back in a severe bun, her weathered face set in an expression of fierce determination. She looked to be somewhere in her 60s, with the kind of energy that suggested she could outlast women half her age. "Morning, Martha," Caleb said, his voice carefully neutral. "Don't you morning Martha me." The woman stopped in front of them, hands on her hips. "I heard you picked up a half-dead woman from your fence line yesterday and didn't think to send for the doctor. She didn't need a doctor, she needed water and rest. And you're qualified to make that judgment, are you?" Martha's sharp eyes swung to Elena. "You must be the mail-order bride." Elena straightened her spine. "I'm Elena Harper. I know who you are. Word travels fast out here." Martha stepped closer, studying Elena's face with an intensity that made her want to look away. "You walked 30 miles in the summer heat with no water." "Yes, ma'am." "Most men couldn't have done that." "I'm not most men." Something flickered in Martha's expression, not quite approval, but close to it. "No," she said slowly. "I don't suppose you are." She turned back to Caleb. "I'm taking her to my place for a proper examination. You can have her back when I'm satisfied she's not going to drop dead in your fields." "Martha, that wasn't a request." Caleb looked at Elena, and she saw the question in his eyes. She could refuse. She could insist on staying on, proving herself, on working through the pain. But something about Martha's fierce concern reminded her of her own mother dead these past 8 years. And something about the way Caleb was looking at her suggested he actually wanted her to go, not because he didn't want her here, but because he was worried. "I'll go," Elena said, "but I'm coming back this afternoon." Martha snorted. "We'll see about that." She was wrong. Elena was back by noon. Martha had prodded and poked and asked 100 questions about her symptoms, her history, her state of mind. She'd made Elena drink 3 full glasses of water and eat a bowl of soup. She'd examined the blisters on Elena's feet with a practiced eye and applied a salve that stung like fire but immediately felt better. And then when Elena had asked about Caleb, Martha had gone quiet. "He's a good man," she'd said finally. "But he's been alone too long. His wife's death broke something in him. I've watched him build walls around himself for 4 years now. Walls so high I wasn't sure anyone could get over them." "I'm not trying to get over his walls," Elena had replied. "I'm just trying to survive." Martha had looked at her for a long moment. Then she'd said, "Sometimes that's the same thing." Now Elena stood in Caleb's kitchen, rolling up her sleeves. "Where do you keep your ledgers?" Caleb looked up from the harness he was mending. "My what?" "Your account books, financial records. You said you're down to 63 head from 90. I want to see the numbers." "Why?" "Because I told you I can manage accounts. And I can't do that if I don't know what I'm working with." Caleb stared at her like she'd started speaking a foreign language. Then slowly he stood up and walked to a cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a battered leather book and handed it to her. "Haven't touched it in months," he admitted. "Maybe longer." Elena opened the ledger. Her stomach dropped. The numbers were a disaster. Incomplete entries, missing calculations, expenses, recorded without any corresponding income. It was like looking at a ship that had been taking on water for years while the captain pretended everything was fine. "Caleb," she kept her voice steady with effort. "How much do you owe?" His jaw tightened. "Enough." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." He turned away, picking up the harness again. "The bank's been patient. They know I'm good for it eventually." "The bank." Elena flipped to the back of the ledger where someone, probably not Caleb, had made a note in different handwriting. "The First Bank of Thornwood." "That's right." "And the loan officer is—" She squinted at the name. "Victor Hale." The harness slipped from Caleb's hands. When he turned around, his face had gone pale. "Where did you see that name?" "Right here, in your ledger." Elena held up the book. Someone wrote a note. V. Hale inquired about property values June 15th. "Who is he?" Caleb crossed the room in 3 strides and took the ledger from her hands. He stared at the note like it was a snake coiled in the pages. "Victor Hale," he said slowly, "is the reason I'm down 30 head of cattle, the reason half my neighbors have already sold their land, and the reason I haven't slept through the night in 6 months." Elena felt a chill run down her spine despite the summer heat. "Tell me." So he did. Victor Hale had arrived in Thornwood 2 years ago, buying up the old Harrison Bank and renaming it with his own money. At first, everyone had been grateful. The previous owners had been stingy with loans, suspicious of anyone who didn't have 3 generations of local family behind them. Hale was different. He offered generous terms, reasonable interest money when people needed it most. Then the railroad company announced plans to build a new line through the territory. Suddenly, the land that had seemed worthless was worth a fortune. And suddenly, Victor Hale started calling in loans, raising interest rates, finding technical violations in contracts that nobody had read carefully. One by one, the ranches around Thornwood started failing. One by one, Hale bought them up for pennies on the dollar. "He wants this land," Caleb finished, his voice bitter. "All of it. The railroad's going to need water rights, grazing access room for depots and stations. Whoever owns the land when that deal goes through is going to be rich beyond imagining. And you're in the way. I'm the last one holding out." He threw the ledger onto the table. "My grandfather built this ranch with his bare hands. My father died defending it from rustlers. My wife is buried on that hill behind the barn. I will not sell it to a man like Victor Hale." Elena looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time since she'd arrived. She saw the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the stubbornness in the set of his jaw, the grief that still clung to him like a second skin, and underneath all of that, she saw something else. Fear. Not for himself, but for everything he might lose. "Then we won't let him take it," she said. Caleb's eyes snapped to hers. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." She stepped closer to him. "I didn't walk 30 miles through the desert to watch everything fall apart. You need help. I'm here to help. You need someone to fight beside you. I'll fight, but I need you to trust me, Caleb. Can you do that?" The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. "I don't trust easy," he said finally. "Neither do I. But here we are anyway." Another long pause. Then Caleb held out his hand. "Partners." Elena took it. Partners. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Elena threw herself into the work with a ferocity that surprised everyone, including herself. She learned to ride within the first week, her thighs aching and her hands blistered from gripping the reins. She learned which cattle were prone to wandering, which needed extra feed, which ones responded to gentle words, and which ones needed a firmer hand. She reorganized Caleb's ledgers from scratch, tracking every expense, every sale, every penny that came in or went out. She found places to cut costs that Caleb had never considered. She negotiated better prices with the feed supplier in Thornwood, using skills she'd learned watching her father conduct business back in Philadelphia. And slowly, impossibly, she started to feel like she belonged. "You're different," Martha said one afternoon watching Elena hang laundry on the line behind the house. "Different from the woman who showed up half dead 3 weeks ago." "I'm the same woman." Elena pinned a shirt to the line. "I'm just not dying anymore." "That's not what I mean." Martha handed her another shirt. "You've got color in your cheeks, strength in your arms, and something in your eyes that wasn't there before." "What's that?" "Hope." Elena's hand stilled on the clothesline. She wanted to deny it. Hope was dangerous. Hope was what got you hurt. But she couldn't lie to Martha. The older woman saw too much. "Maybe," she admitted. "A little." Martha smiled, a rare expression on her weathered face. "Hold on to it, girl. You're going to need it." She was right. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning. Elena was in the barn checking on a mare that had been favoring her left foreleg when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Fast hoofbeats, the kind that meant urgency. She stepped out of the barn just as a young man on a lathered horse came skidding to a stop in front of the house. He couldn't have been more than 17, with a shock of red hair and a face full of freckles. "Mr. Ryder," he shouted. Mr. Ryder, you gotta come quick. Caleb emerged from behind the house, a shovel still in his hands. What is it, Billy? It's the Johnson place. The boy was breathing hard, his words tumbling over each other. Someone cut their fence last night, let out half their cattle. Mrs. Johnson found them scattered all over the North Range this morning. Caleb's face went hard. Anyone see who did it? No, sir. But Mr. Johnson, Billy swallowed. Mr. Johnson said to tell you that Mr. Hale came by yesterday, made another offer on the land, said it was his final offer. The shovel dropped from Caleb's hands. Saddle my horse, he said to Billy. Elena, stay here. No. The word came out before she could stop it. Caleb turned to stare at her. This could be dangerous. I don't care. She was already moving toward the barn. The Johnsons need help. You need help. I'm coming. For a moment, she thought he was going to argue. Then something shifted in his expression. Respect maybe, or resignation. Can you keep up? Try me. They rode hard for 20 minutes, the summer sun beating down on their backs. Elena's muscles screamed in protest, but she kept pace with Caleb, refusing to fall behind. When they finally crested the rise above the Johnson ranch, she understood why Billy had been so panicked. Cattle were everywhere, scattered across the range like seeds thrown by a careless hand. And in the middle of it all, a man and woman worked frantically to round them up, their movements growing more desperate by the minute. Come on, Caleb said, and spurred his horse forward. What followed was 4 hours of the hardest work Elena had ever done. Riding, shouting, herding stubborn cattle back toward the broken fence line while the Johnsons worked to repair it. Her throat went raw from yelling. Her arms ached from hauling on the reins. Twice she nearly fell off her horse when a particularly stubborn steer decided to change direction without warning. But she didn't give up. And by the time the sun started its descent toward the horizon, every last head of cattle was back inside the fence. I don't know how to thank you, Mrs. Johnson said, gripping Elena's hands with tears in her eyes. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but her grip was iron. If we'd lost those cattle... You didn't. Elena squeezed back. That's what matters. You're the mail-order bride, aren't you? The one who walked through the desert? Elena nodded. Mrs. Johnson studied her face for a long moment. Then she pulled Elena into a fierce hug. You belong here, she whispered. Don't let anyone tell you different. On the ride home, Caleb was quiet. Elena let the silence stretch, too tired to fill it with words. But when they finally reached the ranch, he stopped his horse and turned to look at her. You did good today. I did what needed doing. That's what I mean. He hesitated, like he was trying to find words that didn't come easily. Most people, they talk about helping. They make promises. But when it comes time to actually do the work, they find excuses. You didn't. Elena met his eyes. I'm not most people. No. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I'm starting to figure that out. They rode the rest of the way in silence. But something had changed between them. Something small, fragile, barely visible. The beginning of trust. A week later, Victor Hale came to call. Elena was alone in the house when she heard the carriage approaching. Caleb had ridden out to check the north fence line, and Martha had gone to town for supplies. The sound of wheels on hard-packed dirt made her heart beat faster. She stepped onto the porch and watched the carriage approach. It was black and polished, pulled by 2 matched gray horses that looked like they'd never done a day's work in their lives. The man who stepped out of it looked the same way. Victor Hale was handsome. That was the first thing Elena noticed, and she hated herself for noticing it. He was tall and lean, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes the color of river ice. His suit probably cost more than everything Elena had ever owned combined. Good afternoon? His voice was smooth, cultured, completely at odds with the rough landscape around them. I don't believe we've met. I'm Victor Hale. I know who you are. Ah. He smiled, showing perfect white teeth. Then you're at a disadvantage. You are Elena Harper, the mail-order bride. Something flickered in his eyes, interest calculation, she couldn't tell which. I've heard about you, Miss Harper. They say you walked 30 miles through the desert to get here. They say correctly. Impressive. He took a step closer. That kind of determination is rare, especially in a woman. Elena felt her spine stiffen. Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Hale? I was hoping to speak with Mr. Ryder. He's not here. Then perhaps you could give him a message. Hale reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. My final offer for the property. I think he'll find the terms generous. Elena didn't move to take the paper. He's not going to sell. Everyone sells eventually, Miss Harper. Hale's smile didn't waver, but something cold crept into his eyes. It's simply a matter of finding the right price, or the right pressure. Is that a threat? A statement of fact. He tucked the paper back into his jacket. This land is going to change hands. The only question is whether Mr. Ryder profits from that change, or suffers from it. I think you should leave now. Hale studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed softly. You're a fascinating woman, Miss Harper. I look forward to watching what happens next. He climbed back into his carriage without another word. Elena watched it disappear down the road, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. When Caleb returned that evening, she told him everything. His face went through a dozen emotions: anger, fear, determination, before settling into something hard and cold. He's testing us, Caleb said. Seeing what we're made of. Then let's show him. Elena didn't know then how soon that test would come. She didn't know about the fire that was already being planned, the destruction that would bring them to their knees, or the choice she would have to make in the flames. All she knew was that she was done running, done surviving. It was time to fight. 3 days after Hale's visit, the horses went missing. Elena woke to the sound of Caleb's voice, sharp and urgent, calling her name from the barn. She threw on clothes and ran outside to find him standing in the middle of an empty corral, his face ashen. They're gone. His voice was hollow. All 6 of them. Cut the fence and drove them off sometime during the night. Hale. Can't prove it. Caleb slammed his fist against the fence post hard enough to split his knuckles. That's the hell of it. Can't prove a damn thing. Elena grabbed his hand before he could hit the post again. Blood was already welling from his torn skin. Stop. She held on tight when he tried to pull away. Hurting yourself won't bring them back. Nothing will bring them back. The words came out as a roar. Don't you understand? Those horses were worth more than everything else on this ranch combined. Without them, we can't work the cattle. Can't get to town. Can't do anything except sit here and wait for Hale to pick us apart piece by piece. Elena didn't let go of his hand. She could feel his pulse hammering against her fingers, could see the desperation in his eyes. Then we'll find them. Elena, we'll find them, Caleb. She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. I didn't walk through hell to give up now. Neither did you. So stop punching fence post and start thinking. Where would someone take 6 stolen horses if they didn't want to be found? Something shifted in his face. The despair didn't disappear, but it made room for something else. Calculation. Strategy. There's a canyon, he said slowly. About 10 miles north. Nobody goes there because the terrain's too rough for cattle, but horses could manage it. Then that's where we start. They borrowed horses from Martha, 2 aging mares that had seen better days, but could still cover ground when they needed to. The ride north was punishing the sun brutal, the terrain exactly as bad as Caleb had warned. But Elena didn't complain, didn't slow down, didn't let herself think about anything except putting 1 mile behind them, then another, then another. It took them most of the day to find the canyon. And when they did, Elena's heart nearly stopped. The horses were there. All 6 of them hobbled and nervous huddled together in a narrow draw. But they weren't alone. 2 men sat by a small fire, their backs to the canyon entrance. One of them was cleaning a rifle. Stay here, Caleb breathed. Like hell. Elena. Those are our horses. She slid off her mare and pulled the shotgun from her saddle. And I'm not letting some hired thugs keep them. She didn't give him time to argue. She started walking toward the canyon floor, her boots crunching on loose stone, the shotgun held steady in both hands. The men heard her coming. They scrambled to their feet, reaching for weapons, their faces twisting with surprise. Don't. Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. Don't even think about it. The one with the rifle hesitated. His partner, younger, with a nervous look in his eyes, actually raised his hands. Lady, you don't want to do this. You're wrong. She cocked the shotgun. I very much want to do this. Now step away from those horses. We got orders. I don't care about your orders. She took another step forward. I care about those horses, and I care about going home before dark. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to unhobble those animals and walk away. And you're going to tell whoever sent you that the Ryder Ranch isn't as easy a target as they thought. The younger man looked at his partner. Jimmy? Shut up. Jimmy's eyes were fixed on Elena's face. You ain't gonna shoot us. Try me. The silence stretched like a wire pulled to breaking. Elena's hands didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't waver. And after what felt like an eternity, Jimmy lowered his rifle. Fine. He spat in the dirt. Take the damn horses. But this ain't over. No. Elena agreed. It isn't. The ride home took hours. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was setting and Elena could barely keep her eyes open. But the horses were back, all 6 of them safe in the corral drinking from the water trough like nothing had happened. Caleb stood beside her watching them. His hand found hers in the darkness. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. She turned to look at him. And neither were you. And neither were those horses, so I'd say today was a good day. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with something she couldn't quite identify. My wife. He stopped, swallowed, started again. My wife always said I was too stubborn to ask for help. Said it would be the death of me someday. She sounds like a smart woman. She was. He tightened his grip on Elena's hand. But I think she would have liked you. Elena felt something shift in her chest. Something that had been locked away for a very long time. I think I would have liked her too. They stood there in the darkness, hands clasped, watching the horses drink. And for the first time since she'd arrived at the Ryder Ranch, Elena allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found something worth fighting for. Word spread quickly about what had happened in the canyon. Within days, Elena had become something of a legend. The mail-order bride who'd faced down 2 armed men with nothing but a shotgun and pure nerve. The Eastern woman who'd proven she was tougher than anyone had expected. People started coming by the ranch. Neighbors who'd kept their distance before, uncertain about the stranger in their midst. They brought food news offers of help. One old rancher named Tom Grayson showed up with a hunting dog he said he didn't need anymore. Figured you could use the extra security, he said gruffly. She's a good watchdog, barks at anything that don't belong. Elena accepted the dog, a graying mutt with soulful eyes and a surprisingly loud bark, and thanked him sincerely. Why now? She asked before he left. Why help us now when you didn't before? Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at her with something like respect in his eyes. Because you showed us something, miss. Showed us that Hale ain't invincible. That somebody's finally willing to stand up and fight. He put on his hat. That means something around here. Means a lot. After he left, Elena sat on the porch with the dog at her feet and thought about what he'd said. Stand up and fight. She'd spent her whole life running from poverty, from judgment, from a world that told her she wasn't enough. She'd come west to escape, not to make a stand. But somewhere along the way, somewhere between the desert and the canyon, and all the small moments in between, something had changed. She wasn't running anymore. You look like you're thinking too hard. Caleb's voice came from the doorway. Elena looked up to find him watching her with that guarded expression she was learning to read. Just wondering what comes next. Does it matter? He sat down beside her. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Together. Such a simple word, but it meant everything. Elena leaned her shoulder against his just slightly, just enough to feel the warmth of him beside her. Together, she agreed. The dog at their feet let out a contented sigh, and for one perfect moment, the world was quiet. The peace lasted exactly 11 days. Elena was in the kitchen when she heard the dog start barking. Not the lazy bark that meant a rabbit had crossed the yard, but the sharp, frantic sound that meant danger. She grabbed the shotgun from beside the door and ran outside. A man stood at the edge of the property holding an envelope. He wasn't one of Hale's hired hands. She recognized him from town. Deputy something. His face looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Miss Harper." He tipped his hat without meeting her eyes. "I'm looking for Mr. Ryder." "He's in the barn. What's this about?" The deputy held out the envelope like it might bite him. "Bank notice. Mr. Hale sent me to deliver it personally." Elena's stomach dropped. She took the envelope and tore it open before she could talk herself out of it. The words blurred together at first. Legal language, formal phrases, numbers that made her head spin. But the meaning was clear enough. Immediate payment required. Full balance of outstanding loan. Failure to comply within 30 days will result in foreclosure proceedings. "He can't do this." Her voice came out strange. "The original terms, changed last month." The deputy was already backing toward his horse. "Some clause in the fine print. I'm sorry, miss. I truly am." He was gone before Elena could respond. She stood there holding the paper, her hands shaking. 30 days. They had 30 days to come up with more money than the ranch had seen in years. More money than she'd ever had in her entire life. "Elena," Caleb's voice came from behind her. She turned to face him, and the hope in his eyes, the hope she'd put there over these past weeks, made what she had to do so much harder. She handed him the notice without a word. She watched his face as he read it. Watched the color drain from his skin. Watched his jaw tighten, and his hands clench, and his whole body go rigid with a rage that had nowhere to go. "Son of a bitch." The words came out quiet, deadly. "That lying, cheating son of a bitch. There has to be something we can do. Some way to fight this." "Fight it how?" Caleb crumpled the notice in his fist. "He owns the bank. He owns half the judges in the territory. He's probably got the sheriff in his pocket too." He hurled the paper to the ground. "This was his plan all along. Let me think I had a chance, then pull the rug out when I finally started to hope." "Caleb, I should have known. Should have seen it coming." He turned away from her, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying a weight too heavy to bear. 4 years I've been fighting to keep this place. 4 years of watching everything fall apart piece by piece. And now... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Elena walked over to him, slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "Look at me." He didn't move. "Caleb, look at me." Finally he turned, and the despair in his eyes nearly broke her heart. "We're not done yet," she said. "Do you hear me? We're not done. 30 days is 30 days. That's time enough to figure something out." "Figure what out? I've got nothing left to sell. Nothing left to borrow against. Nothing." "You've got me." The words hung in the air between them. "What? I have money." Elena kept her voice steady even though her heart was racing. "Not much, but some. Money I've been saving since I got here. Money I was keeping for, I don't know, emergencies." "Elena, I can't take your money." "You're not taking it. I'm investing it." She stepped closer. "This is my home now too, Caleb. My future. And I'm not going to stand by and watch it get stolen by some greedy land grabber in a fancy suit. It won't be enough. Even if you had $1,000, it wouldn't be enough." "Then we'll find more." She grabbed his hands, forced him to feel her grip. "We'll ask the neighbors. We'll sell what we can. We'll work every single day between now and that deadline, and we will find a way." Caleb stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Why?" His voice cracked on the word. Why do you care so much? This was supposed to be a business arrangement. Survival. Nothing more. Elena thought about lying. Thought about giving him some practical answer about protecting her own interests. But she was tired of lying, tired of pretending, tired of building walls around a heart that had already started to open. Because somewhere between walking through that desert and standing in your kitchen, she said, I stopped surviving and started living. Because you gave me a chance when nobody else would. Because this ranch, this life, these people... Her voice broke. She forced herself to continue. Because it matters to me. You matter to me. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Then Caleb pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had gone liquid around him. Okay, he whispered against her hair. Okay, we'll fight. The next 2 weeks were a blur of work and worry. Elena rode to every neighboring ranch within a day's travel, asking for help. Some turned her away, too scared of hail, too worried about their own precarious situations. But others gave what they could. Tom Grayson contributed $50 and refused to take no for an answer. The Johnsons offered $20, along with a promise to help with the cattle drive if they could get one organized in time. Martha showed up with a lockbox full of coins she'd been saving for 10 years. Don't you dare refuse it, she said when Elena tried to protest. That money's been sitting in my closet doing nothing. At least this way it might actually matter. It still wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Elena started working the numbers obsessively, trying to find some combination of sales and loans and savings that would add up to what they needed. She barely slept. Barely ate. Caleb found her at the kitchen table one morning, slumped over the ledger with ink smeared on her cheek. You need to rest. I need to find another $300. You can't find it if you collapse from exhaustion. He pulled the ledger away from her. Come on. I made breakfast. I'm not hungry. Elena. His voice was gentle but firm. Please. She looked up at him. His face was haggard, dark circles under his eyes, but he was holding a plate of eggs and bacon like it was the most important thing in the world. She took the plate. They ate in silence, sitting side by side at the table. When she finished, Caleb reached over and wiped the ink from her cheek with his thumb. We're going to make it, he said. One way or another. You don't know that. No. His hand lingered on her face. But I believe it. And right now, that's enough. It wasn't enough. But Elena let herself believe it anyway. The fire started on a Thursday night. Elena woke to the smell of smoke. At first she thought she was dreaming. The acrid scent didn't make sense, didn't fit with the quiet darkness of her room. But then the dog started howling, and she heard Caleb's voice shouting her name, and suddenly she was wide awake and running. She burst out of the house to find the barn ablaze. Flames climbed the walls like living things, hungry and orange and terrifying. Smoke poured into the night sky, blotting out the stars. And somewhere inside that inferno, horses were screaming. The animals. Caleb was already sprinting toward the barn. We have to get them out. Caleb. Wait. But he was gone, disappearing into the smoke before she could stop him. Elena didn't hesitate. She ran after him. The heat hit her like a physical wall. She couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't think about anything except finding Caleb and the animals they'd worked so hard to save. Smoke filled her lungs and she doubled over coughing, but she kept moving forward. Caleb. No answer. Just the roar of flames and the terrified cries of horses. She found the first stall by feel, running her hands along the wall until she hit wood. The door was stuck, swollen from heat maybe, or blocked by debris. She threw her whole weight against it and felt something give. A horse burst past her, nearly knocking her down in its desperate flight toward the exit. Elena grabbed the edge of the stall to steady herself and kept going. Caleb. This time she heard him. His voice came from somewhere deeper in the barn, hoarse and strained. Elena. Over here. She followed the sound, fighting through smoke that had grown so thick she could barely see her own hands. When she finally found him, her heart nearly stopped. He was pinned against the wall. A beam had fallen from the ceiling, trapping his leg. He was trying to lift it, But the angle was wrong, and the flames were getting closer. And oh God, they were both going to die in here. Stop! Elena dropped to her knees beside him. Stop fighting. Let me help. Get out of here. The whole thing's going to come down. Then we'd better move fast. She braced her shoulder under the beam. On 3. 1, 2, 3. She pushed with everything she had. Every ounce of strength. Every muscle she'd built hauling hay and riding horses and fighting for a future she'd never expected to want this badly. The beam shifted. Just an inch. But it was enough. Caleb pulled his leg free with a grunt of pain, and Elena grabbed his arm and hauled him upright. Can you walk? I'll manage. They stumbled toward the barn entrance together, holding on to each other, coughing so hard they could barely breathe. The flames seemed to reach for them, and twice Elena felt the searing heat brush her skin. But they kept moving, kept fighting, kept refusing to give up. They burst out of the barn just as the roof collapsed. Elena hit the ground hard, Caleb falling beside her. For a long moment, she just lay there gasping for air, watching the barn she'd helped save horses from turn into a pillar of fire against the night sky. Then she heard voices. Martha's voice sharp with panic. Other voices she didn't recognize. Hands grabbing her arms, pulling her away from the heat. Elena, can you hear me? She tried to respond, but the smoke had stolen her voice. All she could do was nod. Caleb's hurt. His leg. I saw. Martha's face swam into view, smudged with soot and streaked with tears. Help is coming. Just hold on. Elena turned her head and found Caleb's hand in the darkness. His fingers closed around hers, squeezing tight. We made it, he whispered. We made it. The barn was gone, but they were alive. For now, that was enough. The next morning brought the full weight of the disaster. Elena walked through the wreckage as the sun came up, picking through charred beams and blackened debris. The barn was a total loss. They'd managed to save the horses, all 6 of them spooked but uninjured, but everything else was gone. Feed, supplies, tools that had taken years to accumulate. And worst of all, the small safe where Caleb had kept the cash they'd collected. The money that was supposed to save them. It's gone. Caleb's voice was hollow. He stood at the edge of the ruins, one arm wrapped around his ribs where he'd cracked something during the escape. All of it. Every penny. We can collect more. Ask the neighbors again. There's no time. He turned to face her, and the defeat in his eyes was terrible to see. The deadline is in 12 days. Even if we sold every animal on this ranch, we couldn't raise enough. It's over, Elena. We lost. No. Elena, I said no. She walked over to him, grabbed his face between her hands, and forced him to look at her. Listen to me, Caleb Ryder. I didn't walk through the desert to die. I didn't face down armed men in a canyon to give up. And I didn't run into a burning building to save your stubborn hide just so you could stand here and tell me we're finished. There's nothing left. There's us. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. There's you and me and every person in this territory who's ever been stepped on by Victor Hale. There's the truth about what he's done and what he's willing to do to get what he wants. That fire wasn't an accident, Caleb. He tried to kill us. And if we give up now, he wins. Caleb stared at her. Something shifted in his eyes, something that might have been hope, or might have been love, or might have been both. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop playing defense. Elena released his face but didn't step back. We've been reacting to everything Hale does, waiting for his next move. It's time we made a move of our own. How? Elena took a deep breath. The plan had been forming in her mind all night while she lay awake, trying not to think about how close they'd come to dying. It was risky. It was probably crazy. But it was all she had. We need to talk to the other ranchers, she said. All of them, not just the ones who've already helped us. Everyone Hale has threatened, everyone he's cheated, everyone who's lost land or money or hope because of him. Most of them are too scared to talk. Then we make them less scared. Elena grabbed his hand. We show them what happened here. We show them the fire, the destruction, the fact that Hale is willing to commit murder to get what he wants. and then we give them a choice: stand together or fall alone. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. You really believe this could work? I believe it's better than giving up. She squeezed his hand. And I believe in you. In us. In everything we've built together. The silence stretched between them. Then Caleb lifted their joined hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles. All right, he said. Let's go start a revolution. They spent the next 3 days riding from ranch to ranch, telling their story. Elena spoke at each stop, describing the fire in vivid detail. The smell of smoke, the screams of the horses, the moment when she'd thought they were both going to die. She watched faces change as she talked, suspicion giving way to horror, fear giving way to anger. And slowly, impossibly, people started listening. Old Jim Hawkins, who'd lost his spread to Hale 2 years ago, agreed to sign an affidavit describing how his loan terms had been illegally changed. The widow Patterson, whose husband had died under mysterious circumstances a month before their ranch was foreclosed, finally broke her silence about the threats she'd received. Even the deputy who'd delivered the foreclosure notice showed up at their meeting, pale and shaking, to confess that Hale had bribed him to look the other way. We've got enough, Martha said on the 4th night, spreading papers across Elena's kitchen table. Testimony from a dozen witnesses, documentation of illegal practices, evidence that the fire was deliberately set. She looked up with fierce satisfaction. Enough to bring down a railroad baron. Enough to bring down Hale, if we can get it to the right people. Martha tapped one of the papers. There's a federal marshal coming through Thornwood next week. Man named Collins. He's got a reputation for being honest, one of the few lawmen Hale hasn't managed to buy. Can we trust him? We don't have a choice. Martha met Elena's eyes. This is it, girl. Our one shot. If we miss... She didn't have to finish the sentence. Elena looked at Caleb, who'd been silent through most of the conversation. His face was drawn, exhausted, but there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen in weeks. Determination. We won't miss, he said. We can't afford to. The meeting with Marshal Collins was set for Sunday. That gave them 5 days. 5 days to gather the last pieces of evidence. 5 days to prepare their case. 5 days to pray that Hale didn't figure out what they were planning. On the 3rd day, Elena was alone at the ranch when she heard a horse approaching. She grabbed the shotgun, always within reach now, and stepped onto the porch. Victor Hale smiled at her from the saddle. Miss Harper? He dismounted with the easy grace of a man who'd never done manual labor in his life. What a pleasure to see you again. Get off this property. Now, is that any way to treat a neighbor who's come to offer his condolences? His smile didn't waver. I heard about the fire. Terrible tragedy. You and Mr. Ryder are lucky to be alive. We both know that fire was no accident. Do we? Hale took a step closer. That's a serious accusation. I hope you can back it up. I can, and I will. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or concern, but his smile stayed fixed in place. You're a remarkable woman, Miss Harper. I meant that when I said it before. Strong, determined, willing to fight for what you believe in. He paused. Those are admirable qualities. The kind of qualities I value highly. What are you saying? I'm saying that perhaps we've been approaching this situation all wrong. He stopped a few feet from the porch, close enough for her to see the calculation in his cold eyes. You want to save this ranch. I want the land. Perhaps there's a way we can both get what we want. Elena's blood went cold. I'm listening. Leave Caleb Ryder. Come work for me instead. His voice dropped, became almost intimate. I could use someone with your intelligence, your courage. I'd pay you 10 times what you'd ever earn scratching dirt on this miserable patch of ground. You'd have fine clothes, a comfortable home, everything you left behind in Philadelphia, and more. And the ranch would become mine, of course, but you wouldn't need to worry about that anymore. He smiled. You'd be too busy enjoying the fruits of your new position. For one brief, terrible moment, Elena actually considered it. Not because she wanted the money, not because she wanted comfort or fine clothes or any of the things Hale was offering, but because she was tired, so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of worrying, tired of wondering if everything they were doing would be enough. Then she thought about Caleb, about the way he'd held her after the fire, about the trust in his eyes when he'd agreed to her plan, about everything they'd built together in the space of a few short weeks. No. The word came out quiet but certain. Hale's smile faded. Think carefully, Miss Harper. This is a generous offer. I won't make it again. I don't need to think. Elena raised the shotgun. I already know exactly who I am and what I want, and neither of those things include you. The silence stretched between them taut as a wire. Then Hale laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Very well. Have it your way. He turned back toward his horse. But remember this moment, Miss Harper. Remember that I gave you a chance to walk away. Because when I destroy everything you love, and I will, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. He rode away without looking back. Elena stood on the porch until he disappeared from sight. The shotgun still raised her hands, trembling with rage and fear, and something else she couldn't quite name. When Caleb returned that evening, she told him everything. His face went through a dozen emotions: anger, fear, possessiveness, and finally something that looked almost like wonder. He offered you everything, he said slowly. Money, power, security, everything you came west looking for. That's not what I came west looking for. Then what did you come looking for? Elena looked at him, this stubborn, broken, beautiful man who had carried her out of the desert and into something that felt terrifyingly like home. I came looking for a chance to be more than what other people decided I was, she said. And I found it, right here, with you. Caleb crossed the room in 2 strides and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was fierce and desperate and full of everything neither of them had been able to say out loud. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens on Sunday, he whispered, I need you to know something. What? I love you. His voice cracked on the words. I didn't mean to. I didn't think I could. But I do. And even if Hale takes everything else, he can't take that. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them away. I love you too, she said. God help me, I love you too. They held each other in the gathering darkness. 2 people who had lost everything and found each other. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, this was enough. Sunday came with a stillness that felt like held breath. Elena woke before dawn, her body pressed against Caleb's warmth. Neither of them had slept much. The night had been filled with whispered conversations, desperate plans, and moments of quiet terror that neither wanted to name. You awake? Caleb's voice was rough with exhaustion. Haven't really slept. Me neither. He pulled her closer. Keep thinking about everything that could go wrong. Don't. Elena turned to face him. We've done everything we can. The rest is up to the marshal. And if he doesn't believe us, he will. Elena, he will. She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. Because we have the truth. And because I refuse to accept any other outcome. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, a small, surprised sound. What? Nothing, just... He shook his head. A month ago, I was ready to give up. Sell the ranch, leave the territory, start over somewhere. Nobody knew my name. And now here I am about to take on the most powerful man in the county, and somehow, I actually believe we might win. What changed? You. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her palm. You changed everything. They rode into Thornwood together side by side. The town was quiet for a Sunday morning. Most folks were in church, their voices drifting faintly from the white clapboard building at the end of Main Street. Elena could hear the hymn they were singing, something about grace, about being saved. She hoped it was a good omen. Marshal Collins was waiting at the hotel. He was older than Elena had expected, maybe 60, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. But those eyes were sharp, and when he shook her hand, his grip was firm and honest. "Miss Harper, Mr. Ryder." He gestured to a table in the corner. "I've read through the documents you sent ahead. Impressive work." "Impressive crimes," Elena corrected. "We're just documenting them." A ghost of a smile crossed the marshal's face. "Fair point." He sat down and spread their papers across the table. "Walk me through it, from the beginning." Elena talked for nearly an hour. She described Hale's pattern of predatory lending, the suspicious timing of accidents and fires, the witnesses who'd been threatened into silence. Caleb filled in details about the local ranchers who had lost what, when, and under what circumstances. Martha had gathered more testimony overnight. The widow Patterson, old Jim Hawkins, even the nervous deputy who'd delivered their foreclosure notice. When they finished, Marshal Collins sat back in his chair and studied them both. "You know what you're accusing him of?" "Yes, sir." "Fraud, arson, attempted murder." He tapped the papers. "These are hanging offenses." "He deserves worse," Caleb said quietly. "That's not for you to decide." Collins gathered the documents and slid them into his satchel. "But it might be for a judge and jury." He stood up. "I'm going to need a few days to verify everything. Talk to the witnesses myself. Make sure this case is solid before I move on it." "We don't have a few days." Elena's voice came out sharper than she intended. "The foreclosure deadline is in 8 days. If Hale takes the ranch before you act, then he'll have won one battle." Collins met her eyes. "But not the war. Miss Harper, I've been chasing men like Victor Hale for 30 years. They're patient, they're careful, and they're very, very good at covering their tracks." He paused. "But they always make mistakes eventually. And when they do, I'll be there. And in the meantime, what are we supposed to do? Whatever you have to." He tipped his hat. "I'll be in touch." He walked out of the hotel, leaving Elena and Caleb alone with their fears. "He's not going to make it in time." Caleb's voice was flat. "We did all of this for nothing." "We don't know that." "Elena." "We don't know that." She grabbed his arm. "The marshal said he needs a few days. That still leaves time before the deadline. And even if—" She stopped, swallowed. "Even if we lose the ranch, Hale doesn't walk away clean. He faces justice. He pays for what he's done. That's supposed to make me feel better. Watching my family's land get sold off to the man who destroyed us, knowing he might go to prison someday." "No." Elena's grip tightened. "It's supposed to remind you that this isn't over, that we're still fighting, that giving up now means letting him win completely instead of just partially." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. The anger in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by something that looked like resignation. "You really believe that? I have to." She released his arm. "Because if I don't, then everything we've done, everything we've been through means nothing. And I'm not ready to accept that." The ride home was silent. Elena's mind raced through possibilities, calculations, desperate plans that fell apart as soon as she examined them. 8 days. They had 8 days to come up with enough money to pay off the loan or find some other way to stop the foreclosure or accept that they were going to lose. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice the figure standing at the entrance to the ranch. "Caleb," she pointed. "Someone's there." He pulled his rifle from the saddle. "Stay behind me." They approached slowly, cautiously. But as they got closer, Elena recognized the silver hair, the severe posture, the expression of fierce determination. Martha. And she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a crowd of people. Elena counted quickly, 15, maybe 20. She recognized some faces: Tom Grayson, the Johnsons, the widow Patterson. Others were strangers. "What is this?" Caleb's voice was wary. Martha stepped forward. "This is what happens when good people finally get tired of being afraid." "I don't understand. We've been talking." Martha gestured at the crowd behind her. "All of us. Since you left for town this morning." She took a deep breath. We know the marshal might not move in time. We know you might lose this ranch no matter what happens with the investigation. And we decided—" She paused. "We decided we're not going to let that happen." Elena felt her heart stutter. "Martha, what are you saying?" "I'm saying we took up a collection." Martha reached into her coat and pulled out a leather pouch. "Every ranch, every family, everyone who's been hurt by Victor Hale or who's afraid they might be next, we pooled our money." She handed the pouch to Caleb. He opened it with trembling hands. His face went pale. "Martha, this is $3,427. Martha's voice was thick with emotion. "It's not charity, Caleb. It's an investment. We're all betting that if you can hold on to this ranch, it gives the rest of us hope. It proves that Hale can be beaten." "I can't accept this." "You can, and you will." Tom Grayson stepped forward, his weathered face set with determination. "My grandfather knew your grandfather. They built this territory together before men like Hale came along, trying to buy everything that wasn't nailed down. I'll be damned if I watch the last honest rancher in the county lose his land because he was too proud to accept help." "This isn't pride." "Then what is it?" Mrs. Johnson pushed through the crowd. "You saved our cattle, Caleb. You and Elena. When everyone else was too scared to get involved, you showed up and did the work. You think we forgot that? We haven't forgotten anything," someone else called out. "That's why we're here." Elena watched Caleb's face as the voices rose around them. She saw the resistance crumble, saw the walls he'd built, the walls Martha had warned her about, finally start to fall. "I don't know what to say." His voice cracked. "I don't—" Elena reached over and closed his fingers around the pouch. "Say thank you," she whispered. "And then, let's go save this ranch." They rode to Thornwood the next morning with enough money to pay off the loan in full. Victor Hale wasn't at the bank when they arrived. His assistant, a thin, nervous man named Peters, tried to refuse the payment at first. "Mr. Hale isn't here. You'll have to come back." "We're not coming back." Elena slapped the stack of bills on the counter. "This is the full balance of the loan plus interest, plus every penny of fees your employer has illegally added over the past year. Count it." Peters's hands shook as he counted. Twice he lost track and had to start over. Elena waited, her arms crossed, her expression giving nothing away. It's all here." Peters looked up at her with something like fear. "But Mr. Hale—" "Mr. Hale can take his complaints to Marshal Collins." Caleb stepped forward. "Now give us our deed and mark this loan as paid in full." "I don't have the authority. You have a pen and you have a ledger." Elena's voice went cold. "Use them, or I'll make sure the marshal knows you obstructed the legal settlement of a debt." Peters scrambled to comply. 15 minutes later, Elena and Caleb walked out of the First Bank of Thornwood with a stamped receipt and a clear title to the Ryder Ranch. They didn't speak until they were well outside of town. Then, Caleb pulled his horse to a stop and just sat there, staring at the paper in his hands. "It's over." His voice was wondering. "It's actually over." "The loan is over." Elena pulled up beside him. "Hale isn't." "I know, but this—" He held up the receipt. "This is mine again. Really mine. For the first time in 4 years, nobody can take it away." Elena watched his face, watched the tension drain out of his shoulders, the lines around his eyes soften. For a moment he looked younger, lighter, like a man who had finally set down a burden he'd been carrying for too long. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "I'm thinking about my wife." He didn't look at her. "About the day I buried her on that hill behind the barn. About the promise I made to keep this land safe no matter what. You kept it. We kept it." He finally met her eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you, Elena. You know that, right?" "You could have. You just would have been more miserable about it." A surprised laugh escaped him. "Probably true." They started riding again side by side. The summer sun beat down on their shoulders, but for once, Elena didn't mind the heat. It felt like warmth instead of punishment, like the world was finally tentatively on their side. Elena? I've been thinking. Dangerous habit. I'm serious. Caleb pulled his horse to another stop. His expression had shifted, nervous now, uncertain in a way she'd never seen from him before. About us. About what this arrangement was supposed to be versus what it's become. Elena's heart started beating faster. What about it? The agreement we made said either party could end things with 30 days' notice. He swallowed hard. I want to change that. Change it how? I want to marry you. The words came out in a rush. Really marry you. Not a business arrangement or a partnership of convenience. A real marriage with vows and witnesses and everything that comes after. Elena stared at him. I know it's fast. Caleb continued, the words tumbling over each other. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. I know there's still danger ahead, and the marshal hasn't moved on Hale yet, and everything could still fall apart. But I love you, Elena. I love the way you fight, and the way you think, and the way you refuse to give up no matter how bad things get. And I don't want to spend another day pretending this is something less than what it is. Caleb, you don't have to answer right now. I know I'm asking a lot. I know you came out here looking for survival, not love. But if there's any chance at all that you might feel the same way. Yes. He stopped mid-sentence. What? Yes. Elena kicked her horse forward until they were side by side, close enough to touch. Yes, I'll marry you. Really marry you. With vows and witnesses and everything that comes after. You mean it. Caleb Ryder. I walked 30 miles through the desert to find you. I faced down armed men and burning buildings and the most powerful man in the territory. Do you really think I'd say yes if I didn't mean it? His answer was to lean over and kiss her right there in the middle of the road with the sun blazing overhead and their horses shifting restlessly beneath them. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. Let's go home, Elena said. Let's go home, Caleb agreed. They were halfway back to the ranch when they saw the smoke. Elena's blood went cold. Not again. Please God, not again. They kicked their horses into a gallop, riding hard toward the column of black smoke rising against the blue sky. Elena's mind raced through terrible possibilities. The house. The barn they'd started rebuilding. The animals, the neighbors. Everything they'd just fought so hard to save. But when they crested the final hill, what they saw made them both pull up short. The smoke wasn't coming from their ranch. It was coming from Victor Hale's. What the hell? Caleb breathed. They rode closer cautiously. As they approached, Elena could see figures moving in the distance, men on horseback, others on foot. Some were fighting the fire. Others seemed to be loading things into wagons, moving fast, moving with purpose. They're running. She said it before she fully understood what she was seeing. They're clearing out. Why would... A rider broke away from the chaos and came galloping toward them. Elena tensed her hand, moving toward her rifle. But as the rider got closer, she recognized the badge on his chest. Marshal Collins. He pulled up in front of them, his horse lathered and breathing hard. Mr. Ryder, Miss Harper. He nodded grimly. I was coming to find you. What's happening? Caleb demanded. Why is Hale's place burning? Someone set fire to his records room. We're still not sure who. Collins' expression was hard to read. By the time we got there, half the evidence of his operations was destroyed. Elena's heart sank. So he gets away with it after everything. Not exactly. A thin smile crossed the marshal's weathered face. See, Mr. Hale made a mistake. When he saw the fire, he panicked. Started gathering up papers that weren't in the records room, papers he'd been hiding in his personal safe. Papers that proved everything you accused him of and more. What kind of papers? Letters from railroad executives, contracts for land deals that haven't been announced yet, records of bribes paid to local officials. Collins's smile widened. And a detailed ledger of every illegal foreclosure he's orchestrated over the past 3 years, complete with the names of the men he hired to carry them out. Elena felt dizzy. "You caught him." "We caught him." Collins reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded document. "Federal warrant for Victor Hale's arrest. Charges include fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, and about a dozen other things the prosecutors are still sorting out." "Where is he now?" "In custody. My men picked him up about an hour ago trying to board a train headed east." Collins handed the document to Caleb. "Thought you'd want to see this. Official notice that all foreclosure proceedings against properties in this territory are suspended pending investigation." Caleb stared at the paper like he couldn't quite believe it was real. "It's over." His voice was hoarse. "Really over. The legal process will take months, maybe years, but Hale's not getting out of this, and neither are the men who helped him." Collins gathered his reins. "I've got to get back. Just wanted you to know what you did gathering those witnesses, putting together that evidence. It mattered. It made the difference." "Thank you," Elena said, "for believing us." "Thank you for being brave enough to fight." Collins tipped his hat. "Take care of each other." He rode off toward the smoke and chaos, leaving Elena and Caleb alone on the hill. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Caleb started to laugh. It started small, a chuckle, almost disbelieving. But it grew until his whole body was shaking with it, until tears were streaming down his face, until Elena found herself laughing too. Both of them sitting on their horses in the middle of the road, laughing like fools, while smoke rose in the distance. "We won." Caleb gasped the words between fits of laughter. "We actually won. We won." Elena wiped her eyes. "And you owe me a wedding." "I owe you a lot more than that." He reached over and took her hand. "But a wedding's a good place to start." They rode home slowly, savoring the moment. The sun was setting by the time they reached the ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The house looked the same as it always had, weathered, modest, standing stubborn against the endless sky. But to Elena, it had never looked more beautiful. Martha was waiting on the porch. "I heard," she said as they dismounted. "Word travels fast around here. You knew before we did, probably." Caleb tied up his horse. "How much do we owe you for the information?" "Just your happiness." Martha's stern face softened as she looked at Elena. "Both of you. Then I think we can manage that payment." Elena climbed the porch steps and hugged the older woman. "Thank you, Martha, for everything. Don't thank me yet." Martha pulled back with a suspicious gleam in her eye. "I saw the way you two were looking at each other when you rode up. Something's different." Caleb came up behind Elena and put his arm around her shoulders. "We're getting married," he said. "For real this time." Martha's face went through about 6 different expressions before settling on something that might have been joy. "About damn time," she said. That night, for the first time since Elena had arrived at the Ryder Ranch, they sat together on the porch and watched the stars come out. No one was chasing them. No one was threatening them. No one was trying to take away everything they'd built. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked softly. Elena considered the question. She thought about the train that had brought her west, the wagon driver who had abandoned her, the endless miles she'd walked through the desert step by agonizing step. She thought about the moment she'd collapsed in front of this house, certain she was going to die. And she thought about everything that had happened since. The fear and the hope, the fighting and the falling, the slow, impossible transformation from 2 strangers bound by necessity into 2 people bound by something much stronger. "I'm thinking," she said finally, "that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Caleb pulled her closer. "Me too," he said. Above them, the stars wheeled slowly across the endless summer sky. And for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, the future felt full of possibility instead of fear. The ranch was saved. Hale was defeated. And 2 people who had never expected to find love had found it anyway in the most unlikely of places. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would still be hard work ahead, rebuilding what had been destroyed, healing what had been wounded, building a life together in a land that didn't give anything away for free. But they would face it together. And that made all the difference. The wedding was set for the last Sunday of August. Elena stood in Martha's kitchen while the older woman pinned the final alterations on a dress that had once belonged to Caleb's mother. It was simple white cotton, with delicate lace at the collar, but when Elena looked at herself in the small mirror propped against the wall, she barely recognized the woman staring back. "Stop fidgeting." Martha's voice was gruff, but her hands were gentle. "You'll make me stick you with a pin." "I can't help it. I keep thinking something's going to go wrong." "Like what?" "I don't know. Another fire. Another threat. Something." Martha stepped back and studied her work. Victor Hale is in a federal prison awaiting trial. His men scattered to the four winds the day he was arrested. The ranch is paid off, the neighbors are rebuilding, and the man you love is probably pacing a hole in his floor right now because he's as nervous as you are. She put her hands on Elena's shoulders. "Nothing's going to go wrong." "You can't know that." "No." Martha's expression softened. "But I can believe it. And so can you." Elena took a deep breath. Then another. "I never thought I'd have this," she said quietly. "A home. A future. Someone who loves me for who I am, instead of who they want me to be." "And now you do." Martha squeezed her shoulders. "So stop looking for reasons to be afraid, and start looking for reasons to be happy." Elena met the older woman's eyes in the mirror. "When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, you just weren't listening." A laugh escaped Elena's throat, surprised and genuine. "Fair enough. Now come on." Martha turned her toward the door. "You've got a wedding to get to." The ceremony was small. Just the neighbors who had helped them fight, gathered in front of the ranch house under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Tom Grayson had brought his fiddle. Mrs. Johnson had made a cake that was lopsided but tasted like heaven. Even the graying dog that Tom had given them months ago sat at attention near the porch like she understood something important was happening. Caleb stood waiting. His hair slicked back, his best shirt, pressed and clean. When Elena walked toward him, his eyes went bright with something that might have been tears. "You're beautiful," he whispered when she reached him. "You're not so bad yourself." The preacher, a traveling minister who'd been passing through Thornwood, cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved." Elena barely heard those words. She was too busy looking at Caleb's face, remembering the man who had carried her out of the desert, who had held her after the fire, who had fought beside her through everything that came after. She remembered the first time she'd seen him standing on that porch, with wariness in his eyes. She remembered thinking he looked like a man who had given up on hope. He didn't look that way anymore. "Elena Harper." The preacher said, "Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Caleb Ryder, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice cracked on the words. "God help me, I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." The preacher smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Caleb cupped her face in his hands and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The neighbors cheered. Someone started playing the fiddle, and Elena felt something settle into place inside her chest, a sense of rightness of belonging that she'd been searching for her entire life. When they finally broke apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "Hello, Mrs. Ryder." "Hello, Mr. Ryder." "How does it feel?" Elena smiled. "Like coming home." The weeks that followed the wedding were filled with work. The barn needed rebuilding. The fences needed mending. The cattle needed tending before the weather turned. Elena threw herself into every task, learning skills she'd never imagined she'd need, pushing her body past exhaustion, because there was simply too much to do. But she also discovered something unexpected. The knowledge she'd brought from Philadelphia, the medicine, the bookkeeping, the practical skills she'd learned from necessity turned out to be valuable in ways she'd never anticipated. It started when Mrs. Johnson's youngest boy fell from a horse and broke his arm. The nearest doctor was 2 days' ride away, and the bone needed setting immediately. Elena remembered what she'd learned from her father's medical books, what she'd practiced on patients in the charity wards when she was desperate for work. She set the bone, splinted it properly, gave instructions for care and recovery. A week later, Tom Grayson's wife came down with a fever that wouldn't break. Elena recognized the symptoms, had seen them before in Philadelphia, and knew which herbs to use, which treatments would help. The fever broke on the third day. Word spread. Within a month, people were riding from miles away to ask Elena's advice on ailments and injuries. She wasn't a real doctor, she knew that, and she never pretended otherwise. But she was better than nothing, and in a territory where medical care was scarce, that counted for something. "You've got a gift," Martha told her one evening, watching Elena prepare a poultice for a neighbor's infected cut. "A real gift." "It's not a gift, it's just knowledge. Knowledge is a gift when you use it to help people." Martha handed her a clean bandage. "Don't sell yourself short, girl. You've done more good in this territory in 3 months than most people do in a lifetime." Elena paused, the poultice half prepared in her hands. She thought about the woman who had answered Caleb's advertisement all those months ago. The woman who had been desperate, defeated, running from a life that had rejected her at every turn. That woman felt like a stranger now. "I never expected this," she said quietly. "Never expected to matter." "Everyone matters," Martha's voice was firm. "Some people just take longer to figure out how." The trial of Victor Hale took place in the territorial capital in late September. Elena and Caleb made the journey together, riding for 3 days to reach the courthouse, where the most powerful man in the county would finally face justice. The courtroom was packed, ranchers and townspeople who'd lost land, officials who'd been complicit, journalists who'd come from as far as Denver to cover the story. Hale sat at the defendant's table, his expensive suit rumpled, his silver hair unkempt. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, like a snake that had finally been defanged. When his eyes found Elena in the crowd, something cold flickered across his face. She didn't look away. The prosecution laid out their case methodically: the fraudulent loans, the intimidation, the arson, the attempted murders. Witness after witness took the stand, telling stories that painted a picture of systematic corruption stretching back years. When Elena was called to testify, she told the truth, all of it. The fire that had nearly killed them, the offer Hale had made to buy her loyalty, the threats, the sabotage, the relentless campaign of destruction. "Miss Harper, excuse me, Mrs. Ryder." The prosecutor corrected himself. "Why didn't you simply accept Mr. Hale's offer? By your own account, he promised you wealth, comfort, security. Why choose to fight instead?" Elena looked at Hale, then at Caleb sitting in the front row, his eyes never leaving her face. "Because some things are worth more than money," she said. "Because the people I love were being hurt and I couldn't stand by and watch. Because my father used to say that a person's worth isn't measured by what they own, but by what they're willing to sacrifice." "And what were you willing to sacrifice?" "Everything." Elena's voice was steady. "Everything I had, everything I was, everything I might have been. Because in the end, the only thing that really matters is whether you can look at yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing." The courtroom was silent. Hale's lawyer tried to discredit her testimony, tried to paint her as a desperate woman seeking revenge, as an outsider who didn't understand how things worked in the territory, as a liar trying to protect her own interests. Elena answered every question calmly, completely, without flinching. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, Caleb was waiting for her at the courtroom door. He pulled her into his arms without a word. "You were incredible," he whispered against her hair. "I was terrified." "Couldn't tell." She laughed shakily. "Good. That was the idea." The verdict came 3 days later. Guilty, on all counts. Victor Hale was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. His assets were seized, his properties sold to pay restitution to the families he'd destroyed. The railroad deal that had driven all his schemes fell through when the company learned about the trial, unwilling to be associated with a convicted criminal. As the marshals led Hale out of the courtroom in chains, he passed within a few feet of Elena. He stopped, looked at her with those cold, calculating eyes. "You think you've won. he said quietly. You think this is over? I don't think anything. Elena met his gaze without flinching. I know. You're going to prison, your empire is in ruins, and everyone you hurt is finally getting justice. That's not a victory. That's just the truth. Hale's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he might say something else, some final threat, some last attempt at intimidation. Instead, he laughed. A bitter, broken sound. You know what the funny thing is? His voice dropped so only she could hear. I actually admired you. Still do in a way. You've got more spine than half the men in this territory. I'll take that as a compliment. Take it however you want. The marshals tugged at his chains. Just remember, there's always another Victor Hale. Always someone willing to take what doesn't belong to them. The question is whether you'll be ready when they come. I will be, Elena said. I always am now. They took him away. And Elena stood in the empty courtroom, feeling something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. The ride home took 4 days. Elena and Caleb stopped at every ranch along the way, sharing the news, accepting congratulations, promising to visit again when things settled down. By the time they finally reached their own property, Elena's voice was hoarse from talking, and her face hurt from smiling. But as they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, she felt tears prick at her eyes anyway. The new barn stood proud against the evening sky, built by the same neighbors who had helped them fight. The house looked the same as ever, small, weathered, stubbornly standing its ground. The cattle grazed peacefully in the fields, their numbers slowly growing as the ranch recovered from everything it had lost. We did it, Caleb said softly. We really did it. We did. Elena reached over and took his hand. Together. They rode down to the house in comfortable silence. Martha was waiting on the porch as always with a pot of coffee and a plate of biscuits. About time, she said as they dismounted. I was starting to think you'd gotten lost. Just taking the scenic route. Caleb kissed the older woman's cheek. Anything happened while we were gone? Mrs. Patterson's cow had twins. Tom Grayson's fence needs mending again. Oh, and some fancy lawyer came by from the city. Martha's eyes twinkled. Said he was looking for Mrs. Elena Ryder. Something about her father's estate. Elena froze. My father's estate? That's what he said. Left his card. Martha pulled a small rectangle of paper from her apron pocket. Said some property deal your father was involved in finally paid out. Apparently you're entitled to a share. Elena took the card with numb fingers. The name on it was unfamiliar, but the address was in Philadelphia. Her old life reaching out to touch her new one. How much? Her voice came out strange. Didn't say. But from the way he was dressed, I'd guess it's not nothing. Caleb put his arm around Elena's shoulders. You okay? I don't know. She stared at the card. 6 months ago, this would have meant everything. A way out. A way back to the life I lost. She looked up at him. Now it just feels strange. Strange how... Elena thought about it, really thought about it. Like it belongs to someone else, she said finally. Like it's meant for the woman I used to be, not the woman I am now. And who are you now? She smiled. Elena Ryder, rancher's wife, amateur healer, survivor of deserts and fires, and Victor Hale. She leaned into his embrace. Someone who chose her own future instead of letting other people choose it for her. Sounds like quite a woman. She is. Elena tucked the lawyer's card into her pocket. She really is. That night they sat on the porch together watching the stars come out. The summer was ending. Soon the leaves would turn, the weather would cool, and the territory would settle into the quiet rhythm of autumn. There would still be hard work ahead. There always was, but for the first time since Elena had arrived at the Ryder Ranch, the future felt full of possibility instead of fear. Can I ask you something? Caleb's voice was soft in the darkness. Anything. Do you ever regret it coming out here? Answering my advertisement. All of it. Elena considered the question. She thought about the train that had brought her west, the wagon driver who had abandoned her the endless miles she'd walked through the desert with nothing but stubborn determination to keep her going. She thought about the fire, the fear, the countless moments when she'd been certain everything was going to fall apart, and she thought about what she'd gained. A home, a purpose, a man who loved her not despite her strength, but because of it. A community that had accepted her as one of their own. A life she'd built with her own two hands. Not for a single second, she said. Not one. Caleb pulled her closer. Good, because I don't regret it either. Even when I was bossing you around about your ledgers, especially then, he laughed softly. My ledgers have never looked better. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. The dog dozed at their feet. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. I want to write a letter, Elena said suddenly. To who? To the woman I was 6 months ago. The one who thought she had nothing left. The one who was so desperate she answered a stranger's advertisement because it was the only option she had. What would you tell her? Elena closed her eyes and thought about it. I'd tell her that survival is important, but it's not enough. That the real victory isn't staying alive, it's choosing to live. That the people who tell you your worth is limited by your circumstances are wrong, and that the only person who gets to decide what you're capable of is you. She opened her eyes and looked at Caleb. I'd tell her that love isn't something you fall into by accident. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice. And that the right partner isn't someone who rescues you, it's someone who stands beside you while you rescue yourself. Caleb's eyes were bright with emotion. Anything else? Yes. Elena smiled. I'd tell her that the desert she's about to walk through isn't a punishment. It's a crucible. And on the other side of it, she's going to find everything she ever wanted, not because someone gave it to her, but because she earned it. The silence that followed was comfortable. Complete. Then Caleb took her hand and raised it to his lips. I love you, Elena Ryder. I love you too, Caleb Ryder. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance. The summer wind carried the scent of sage and prairie grass, and two people who had found each other against all odds sat together in the darkness, holding hands, looking toward a future they'd chosen for themselves. Elena had walked through fire to get here, had crawled through desert dust and faced down armed men and stared into the cold eyes of evil without flinching. She had been abandoned and underestimated and told she would never amount to anything. But she had proven them all wrong. Not because she was lucky, not because someone saved her, but because she had refused to give up on herself even when the whole world seemed determined to break her. That was the real victory. That was the truth she would carry with her for the rest of her life. A woman's worth isn't determined by what she's given. It's determined by what she chooses, what she fights for, what she refuses to surrender. And Elena Harper, Elena Ryder, had chosen to be more than what anyone else expected. She had chosen herself, and in the end, that made all the difference.